it got to a point where I feel like you're walking around almost vacant. And life to me just wasn't worth living like that. And so I just decided that enough was enough. And I wanted to be my very best self. And how could I possibly have impact and make change in the world if I was feeling terrible? Like it just didn't make sense to me. I was a practical person, and efficient and productive, and I had just lost all will to live, and that had stopped me from putting the very best that I could out there.
Today on It's Never About Money, we explore how the food we eat shapes not just our bodies, but our brains, our moods, and the decisions we make. My guest is Jackie Bowker, a functional nutritionist, gut health expert, PhD candidate, and CEO of the Global Feel Better Institute. Jackie works at the intersection of science and practical well-being, helping high performers and everyday people alike harness the power of food to think more clearly, feel more balanced, and live with greater energy. We discuss how ultra-processed foods hijack our biology, why most of us are unknowingly riding a blood sugar roller coaster, and what the gut-brain connection really means for how we think, feel, and behave. We also talk about the systemic and financial barriers to eating well and what it truly means to invest in your health in a world that often nudges us towards convenience over care. This is a conversation about food, but also about clarity, resilience, and the deep connection between what we consume and who we become. So thank you, Jackie, for coming along. I'm excited for this episode. Obviously, as we've previously discussed before, it's really about talking about how nutrition impacts our health and impacts our decision-making and affects our decisions with money and all of that sort of thing. But I thought we might, for the listeners' sake, have a little bit of a primer and an introduction into the world of Jackie Bowker and, how you became fascinated with the world of nutrition to start with.
Yeah, awesome. Well, and thanks for having me, Joe. I love what you told me about how you started this podcast and really diverted your year to bringing on guests to talk about health and how health is connected to wealth. So really aligned with your mission, and thank you for what you do. So, it's interesting. A couple of decades ago, I was obsessed with sugar. And I absolutely loved it. Like, I was the person that would actually be in the supermarket and I would be buying all these bags of lollies, and I'd get to the cash register and I'd be so embarrassed that I'd almost lie. I not almost, I would lie about like, oh, I'm going to a party, and that wasn't true at all. And I'd like be walking
Yeah.
home from work, and opening bags of lollies because I could never decide on one, the bananas, the chicos, the strawberries and cream. Definitely showing my age. Um, but anyway, that, created a lot of what I call symptoms in my body, but I was just completely unaware of that. I was very much on what I call the blood sugar roller coaster. And I used to have these really strange, like sort of almost fainting effects where I would consume a lot of lollies, and a couple of hours later, I'd be like staggering to a park bench to try and sit down, and hangry or irritated or jittery, or bloated. And what I realized was that the sugar was really just breaking down my body, and so that's really was my first. When I landed in my rock bottom moment, of just crippling fatigue, viruses like riddled through my body, couldn't get out of bed, couldn't sleep at night, wired but tired, and no doctor could help me because I didn't have a disease, and so I was just sent away. And my version of rock bottom moment was when I was in a doctor's office and I was written a script for antidepressants. I was referred to the infectious diseases unit, and I was just sent away with no option. Those options weren't good enough for me. I was a happy person, super positive, cup always half full, pathological optimist. And I didn't feel depressed. I didn't think I needed antidepressants. So that was my version of my rock bottom. And I just thought, enough is enough. I have to take this into my own hands and really turn to taking control of my own health. And so in doing so, I turned to real food. I looked at my diet, what I was eating. That to me, that was the lowest hanging fruit, and I read like blogs about the paleo diet and what I could do to really bring more whole foods into my diet. And, that has taken me on a journey of becoming a nutritionist and now a PhD student, and, really trying to help others, because if there's one of me, there's millions more like me. And I just don't want that for anybody.
Yeah. So, what were you doing before all of this? And how did that suffer? Whatever you were doing, or, how did that suffer by the um, sort of choices you were making with food?
Well, I think you get into this state where how you're feeling becomes your new normal. And so I
Yeah.
was like, I had 2 babies at the time. I was dragging myself around. I would actually fall asleep on the floor trying to put my young toddler to bed. And so I was asleep before him. And, I remember picking them up from childcare and just like dying to get them home, trying to muster up some sort of food on the table so that I could get to bed. Always tired, always exhausted, and I just wasn't myself. I think I was irritated. I was probably pretty angry to live with. I remember being so frustrated, like with the kids and things, that I would have to close myself in the bathroom and scream so loudly. And so, that just became my whole new normal. And, it gets to the point where you're not bringing your best self. I don't think I was a very particularly good mother. Like, I'm really not proud of the mother that I was, but I was doing the best that I could at the time. I'm also not proud of the daughter that I was, the friend, the sister, the wife to my husband. And it got to a point where I feel like you're walking around almost vacant. And life to me just wasn't worth living like that. And so I just decided that enough was enough, and I wanted to be my very best self. And how could I possibly have impact and make change in the world if I was feeling terrible? Like, it just didn't make sense to me. I was a practical person, and efficient and productive, and I had just lost all will to live, and that had stopped me from putting the very best that I could out there.
So, what would, I mean, in a person in your predicament, in that particular sort of state, what would actually cause you to go, okay, actually nutrition is the problem here, rather than, external environmental effects, the fact that there's challenges, you're a mother, and, most mothers have a huge responsibility, so it's not easy, from what I hear. I'm not a mother. But yeah, so what made you go, oh, it's nutrition, or nutrition is a pretty fundamental part of the stack? What was that? What was that about?
I think you get to a point where you feel so terrible that you've got to make a change. So you come to this fork in the road where you decide, right, I've got to change something because I don't want to be medicated, and I didn't want to go to the infectious diseases unit. I knew in my heart that that wasn't right, and I don't believe in coincidences. I think things come across your path and you meet people at just the right time that you're ready for them, that you're ready to make a change. And so I I think paleo and hunter gatherer was sort of at the time, and I came across a blog, and I just started reading about it, and it was all about food and these unprocessed foods, like real food. And I hadn't really thought about food like that. I was just very happy having pasta and bread, Vegemite toast for breakfast, a skinny cappuccino. My favorite food was pasta. So when I read that blog and I realized that, gee, I was sort of feeding myself foods that create sugar in the body, and I was really not consuming foods that helped my body and my gut and my brain thrive. I just decided to make a change. And I remember the day that I thought, "Oh, I'm just gonna make this green smoothie thing." I'd never made a green smoothie. I don't think I'd ever had a green smoothie in my life. And I put it together, and I had crippling fatigue at the time. And I drank this drink, which was just a whole food smoothie. And I felt better. Like, I felt energy that I hadn't felt in such a long time, and that for me was a moment where I was like, "I think there might be something to this." And so I just decided to get back to my roots. I'm a scientist at heart, and, really explore more about what I could do to use food to feel better, and that's where it all started.
So, ironically, in a way, the food allowed you to get to a way of getting yourself to a position of being able to focus and study and, you know, apply yourself in such a way, and make a great decision, so that you can impart the profound effects of what has occurred on others in what we're doing at this very moment.
Absolutely, Joe. Like, it's interesting that you say that because, I always people come to me in our clinic now, and they're like, "Oh, I'm going to go to the gym," and it's like it's really hard to. So I'm feeling terrible. I need to go to the gym and work out because I want a better body and I want more energy. But it's really difficult to do that. It's hard to like go to the gym and do a good workout and be consistent with that habit if you're exhausted. I always tell people like dial in your diet so that you have the energy to go to the gym. So that's the first thing that I worked on for myself, like just organically, and that allowed me then the energy. And then I went to the gym and I started joining these group strength training sessions. Through the diet and the movement, my body just completely transformed. Like the fatigue, the sleep, the body fat percentage, all the puffiness went. So yeah, I really think that nutrition and feeding your body, like fueling your cells, gives you the energy that you need to then go on and be motivated to make other changes in your life.
So interesting because, like, I'm always thinking about what comes first. I've had a sleep specialist on, as a hormone specialist, an exercise, professional trainer, and I think to myself, do you enforce sleep? And if you enforce sleep, you get yourself into a good routine, and then maybe you start having a better routine around food. But it does make sense to me that food is almost like the first process because, as an example, if you are caffeinated all the time late into the night, it doesn't matter how hard you try to sleep, it's pretty impossible. If you're full of sugar just before you go to bed, that's going to have an impact, right? So, I don't want to suggest you're the expert here, but like it sounds like nutrition as a starting point gives you a really good base to be able to do the sleep thing, to be able to go and do the exercise thing. Um, yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, we know in science that what we call multi-behavioral interventions, so when we're looking at nutrition, at movement, at sleep, reducing sedentary behavior, we know there is, categorical evidence that this, reduces chronic disease. But what you're saying is, you know, I always like people to think about their blood sugar. We have, like you talked about, the blood sugar roller coaster. We have a level of sugar in our bloodstream that is required to be safe, to give us energy, so we can blink, so we can talk, so our heart can beat. And when we consume foods that create sugar in the body, like your pasta, like your bread, obviously like your sweets and pastries and danishes, what they do is dump enormous amounts of sugar in the bloodstream to put us on the roller coaster. And so what goes up must come down. And so if you're on the blood sugar roller coaster, which is generally what you can probably assume you are in today's lifestyle with these addictive, processed foods that we're consuming, then at night your blood sugar takes a dip. And so many people are waking up at 1 a.m., at 2 a.m., at 3 a.m. in the morning when your body has processed that sugar and you're at the bottom of the roller coaster. And so you're wide awake and you're like, oh, what's going on? Why can't I sleep? And so when you dial in your nutrition and you eat foods that stabilize the blood sugar, your blood sugar stays stable through the night and you've got a better chance of a restorative sleep.
So interesting because, like, obviously, when you speak to the sleep specialist, the disruption of REM or non-REM sleep has either physical implications or implications on the way that you read body language, or and so in a setting like this, as a financial advisor in a client meeting, the inability to have sleep can be all the difference between believing that someone is thinking or feeling a certain way versus another way, and we need every bit of our faculties when we're working. And so, this idea of nutrition having an effect on our end decision making is very real, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there is decades of research in science connecting nutrition and physical activity to cognitive outcomes, so to academic outcomes in children. But it's very bidirectional. Like we eat to fuel our body, and that will improve the quality of our sleep. Improving the quality of our sleep then creates better eating habits. Like I'm, in schools talking to principals, and one of the challenges they have is when their students are not getting a good sleep. They're the ones that are, eating the junk the next day. That's when you feel like eating KFC and things like that, rather than getting a great quality sleep and waking up and wanting to dial in your diet. So it's very much, sleep, nutrition, stress, physical activity. They all work together to dial in, to improve the quality of your habits and behaviors.
Mhm. Now, you've mentioned it, and I think it's very clear and obvious to everybody, including myself, that ultra processed food now makes up the majority of our
Yeah.
sort of modern diet. What's going on inside the body and the brain when we're doing that? And like you talked about the sort of dip with blood sugar. What does this cost us over time?
Oh my goodness. So, I mean, just ultra processed foods, and it's really great that they are being brought to the forefront now, because years ago it was like a calorie is a calorie is a calorie, and that's just simply not true. Like a calorie from ultra processed food, like what it does and what it doesn't do for the body is very real. So you're right. Like Australians are eating about 50% of their diet in ultra processed food, and that has an impact on your gut microbiome, on your satiety system. So we're looking at like your hunger hormones, and all of the things that we're doing, your GLP-1, your leptin, your ghrelin, your blood sugar, your insulin. So it creates this disruption in those hormones, and they're very addictive. They don't keep you full. They're low in fiber. They're high in glucose. So they're just creating this complete imbalance in your body that is then categorically linked to the level of chronic disease that we have.
Jackie, let's put a name to this, because when we say ultra processed foods, people are still going to believe that there's certain things that they eat that are not part of that stack when they very much are. I might presume that when you are consulting with people about this, that you will find people will be eating certain things, and you'll say, well, that's ultra processed, or that shouldn't be eaten. Say, oh, I didn't think that was a problem. This is the problem that we have. Like, a lot of these ultra processed foods are packaged in such a way to appear healthy.
Yeah.
Let's label some of the foods that we're talking about when we say ultra processed.
Oh, absolutely. And it's a really good discussion to have, Joe, because um, you know, the nature of anything being in a packet is processed, right? So because it has to be made in a factory, but then there's food in packets that are better for you than others. And when we're talking about
Mm.
ultra processed, that we're talking about these highly processed cereals, for examples, and sugary, like crisps and other things like that, that are made in a in a laboratory, that are designed by food scientists, that are specifically designed to be very palatable and to create addiction. I was reading something about clinkers the other day, and it's like they have been designed to be the perfect. Um, Everything about them is so addictive. Like they've been designed so that the crunch and the color, so they're using all of your senses to make you want more. And, you can eat a whole bag and not be at all satisfied. So, that's a really good example of something that has been designed where it tastes great. You're seeing color, so it's really attractive. It makes a sound. So, you're listening with your ears, you're watching with your eyes, you're tasting it. So that's an example of an ultra processed
Oh, wow.
food.
This is really sinister because, and I don't want to trivialize it by laughing, but this is the stuff that we're going against when we're feeding our children,
Yeah.
right? If we're not going to be caring about it as an adult, because we make our own choices, we choose to smoke, we don't, it's our prerogative, but we're also feeding our children. So the idea behind working out what is considered good or not for our kids is obviously super important, because these addictive pathways that you talk about sets our kids up for failure in the future
Mm.
if we don't combat it early.
Oh, absolutely. And there's so many things that go into changing behaviors, right? Like we've got individual behavior change, and then there's the system level change, like policy comes into it. It's a really tricky situation that we're in because when you're in a supermarket, and so that's why they always say, shop on the outer edges of the supermarket. Why? Because that's where the fresh produce is, the things that go off. Um, like, there's they're doing science experiments, in schools now where they might have, let's say a McDonald's burger and they just leave it there and it never goes moldy. So, I always say to people, learn to turn over the label of a packet and look at the number of ingredients. And if you can pronounce those ingredients, if they're more than a bottle in your bathroom cabinet, it's most likely, probably something that's being manufactured in synthetic and your body just doesn't know what to do with it.
That's so interesting. That's a great way of thinking about it. So when I asked you to label the ultra processed, you've done that in a very succinct way. Basically, look at the back of the label, look at how many ingredients there are. If there are copious amounts of ingredients and you're unable to be able to even articulate what it is, then it's likely that your digestive tract will be unable to cope
Oh,
with what's going down there.
yeah, I mean, we are an evolutionary mismatch with food that we've got at the moment. Like our human biology is the same as we were when we were hunter gatherers, where we would hunt, we would pick, something, we would pick something off a tree or a plant, or we would hunt to eat. That's what our body is designed for. And yet now we're in this environment where we're exposed to these foods that are delicious, that are hyper palatable, that they're addictive, and they make us want more. So by nature of that, our portion sizes increase. And as a result of that, we're seeing like type 2 diabetes skyrocket. It's a man-made disease. We're seeing, gut issues like bowel cancers and cancers like skyrocket. So all of these diseases are created from by nature of the environment that we're in.
Mm. And so you talk about portion sizes. I think even if we move from ultra processed foods to the normal foods that we've all been used to, the carrots, the
Mhm.
potatoes, and all of that sort of thing, the the reality of it is that it's been suggested, and I've heard that we need to eat more mass to get the same amount of nutrients in than we used to because our soils are so depleted.
Yeah.
So our diets are usually lacking in minerals, and I think we talked previously about magnesium and zinc as a part of that. How is nutrient deficiency actually showing up in our lives?
Yeah, absolutely. I specialize in the gut in my clinic, and so I am privy to we run a gut test, and so every day I get to look at people's microbiome, the human microbiome, and I see so many of these that I can tell what the human diet is doing to our gut health, and our gut health is linked to inflammation. Inflammation is the leading cause of disease. So you're absolutely right. The soils, just by nature of how they have to rotate crops, they're not rotating crops like they used to. So the soils have become, deficient in minerals and the things like the zinc and the magnesium that we have in our foods. And, as well as that, our chronic like, we live in this stressed lifestyle, and stress compromises your digestion. So, it's a bit of chicken and egg, like, if you can't digest the steak that you're eating because you're so stressed out and you're sort of working this really stressed out job, or you're not sleeping at night, right? If you can't digest that steak, because protein is the hardest thing to digest, you're actually not able to absorb those minerals and
Mm.
microminerals and nutrients in that food. And it goes down into the gut, and the gut's like, I don't know what to do with this steak. I'm used to like nutrients in here. So we get this state of like inflammation in the bowel, like leaky gut, and, it just becomes this the people that I see are generally inflamed. They're feeling puffy, tired, they have all these symptoms, but it relates to, the way that they're digesting their food, not just the quality of the food that they're eating.
I mean, I'm going to get to what we do about that uh, issue, but I might keep going with some of the problems that we're seeing here. And one of the things that we talked about was the gut brain connection, and how really how our gut feeling really shows up in the way our moods are. Brain fog, anxiety, emotional reactivity, those types of things. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? Because I know I've read a book. I think it was Julia Enders, from memory. And she was quite funny, actually, the way she communicated about it. Yeah, I really liked her book. But could you communicate a little bit about how that connection exists?
Absolutely. So my favorite way to describe it, because I think analogies are great to hang on to, is that is knowing that the gut and the brain were born out of the same organ. It's just one grew up and one grew down. So
Hmm.
what's happening in the gut is the gut and the brain talk to each other all day and via a communication superhighway called the vagus nerve. And for every message, Joe, that the brain sends to the gut, 9 messages are sent from the gut back to the brain. So they're in constant communication. And as well as that, the brain, has these neurotransmitters, serotonin, and dopamine, and the majority of those neurotransmitters are actually made in the gut. So, that what we do to how we eat and how we sleep, and how we move very much affects how what the state of our gut is, which is consistent with what the state of our brain is.
Mm, mm. And I imagine when we're talking about performance of the brain, and we're talking about these days a much greater awareness of neurodiversity, I imagine that part of your stack of capabilities is to suit the nutrition to the potential wiring of the individual. Could you take me through, as an example, what you might do with someone with autism or ADHD, and how you might treat them differently from a nutritional perspective?
Oh, absolutely. So, I mean, and the focus on whether it's a child that might be neurodiverse or autistic, or whether it's an adult that's got pre-diabetes or diabetes, or whether it's someone that's overweight or obese. What I always do first is dial in the nutrition. So really focusing on good quality plant food. So lots of color in the diet. You don't have to be a vegetarian or a vegan. What we want to do is just add more color. The pigment in those plant foods is very much food for our microbiome. So we get the gut making really good neurotransmitters, so that we can have those feelings of satisfaction, of contentment, of achievement. That's really, really important. And so we dial in the diet first and foremost, really good quality protein, really good quality plant foods, really good quality fats. When we do that, that goes into the body and that helps the gut to heal, because you're removing it's by nature of including those foods, you're removing the inflammatory foods, you're removing the wheats, the dairies, the sugars, just to allow the body to perform how it's supposed to perform. So we're sort of taking an overflowing cup, and we're just taking some things out of the cup to give the body space to heal. And so then when the body is, trying to do that, we're really working to heal the gut lining, to make sure that there isn't leaky gut, there's no inflammation in the bowel. Because, I'm of the belief that the gut and the brain being connected, if you've got a leaky gut, we have to look at, like, is the brain leaky as well? So what we do when we heal the gut is we also are by nature of that healing the brain. So dialing in the nutrition, really making sure that we're eating foods that feed the microbiome and that feed the gut, which is the good quality protein, fat, and fiber. By nature of that, taking out the foods that create blood sugar dysregulation. And then as a result, what people notice is they're calmer. They've got more energy, they've got more focus, and inflammation drops away, weight drops off. Children have more focus, children sleep better. So all of these things dial in the way that the child can feel and perform.
So we've kind of taken it for granted here that adults can just change patterns and make it's easy for them to move from a cycle of sort of blood sugar roller coaster to the even keel aspect. I'll even take it a bit further and say that children, um, when they're already in that on that pathway, try to remove ice cream from them, or watch them stop complaining. It's unlikely. So I wonder what sort of methods or strategies you have to help ease into, because the idea of complete cut and change seems unrealistic to the masses.
Yeah. So it's such a great question. And I get asked this all the time by, parents that are really struggling because, where they essentially think that you have to be perfect. We don't need a perfect diet. We're already, if we're consuming 50% of our diet in ultra processed food, making some changes and just small steps, that's what the science is, small steps, one in front of the other, to create that change in a way that we never want people to feel deprived or unsatisfied. But there's a saying in nutrition, you can't really overeat a chicken breast. So if you're flooding the diet with really delicious whole foods, kids love spaghetti bolognese. So when you give them that, their taste buds very quickly change, and the food, they start to gravitate away from foods that create that chemical taste in your mouth. But you're absolutely right. We're not going to go from being on the blood sugar roller coaster, eating, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and burgers and pasta to completely clean diet that's devoid of anything. We're just so lucky these days, though, because there are really healthy alternatives to unhealthy foods. And we didn't have that before. We didn't even have that 10 years ago.
Yeah.
You can swap out the foods that the person like thinks that they really were addicted to, and you can make alternatives. Chicken schnitzel, you can have a really unhealthy, poor quality meat crumbed with breadcrumbs and all of these things to make that, and fried in seed oils, or you can make a really good quality one that's dipped in nice quality egg that's, I don't know, using a gluten free rice flour, and that's cooked in olive oil. The difference is night and day.
Mm, that makes a lot of sense. So you just have to have a little bit of strategic thought and a bit of a plan of attack.
And you need to make it simple. So, we know that people need things that are easy. That one of the reasons fast food is so popular is because it's convenient, it's easy, it's quick. But a lot of kids, for example, love carrots and hummus, or they might love a boiled egg, and so there's just some thought that go. It doesn't have to be complicated. Berries, things that are real, that are whole, beautiful bliss balls, or, chocolate brownies, but that are made with whole food. So you're right. It takes a little bit of thought. But reaching for a $7 bag of clankers, is not doing anyone any favors,
Mm.
especially not our little people.
I can't tell you, as a Middle Eastern boy born in the 80s, how much it's nice to hear that hummus is now something that everyone eats and isn't something that we get bagged out for.
It's so
It's
good,
so
and,
good. Great. Great.
it's so good, and kids love it.
Yeah.
I don't think I know a single kid that doesn't, even ones that are all they're eating other than that is, like, processed food. Like, kids love foods like that.
Mm. Tell me, to the money, it's expensive to eat healthy. And yeah, what do we do about it?
Well, this is a great question. Supply and demand, the more that we can try and change this paradigm, the more that we'll get support for reducing the cost of food. You're absolutely right. Um, to buy healthy food, say at a cafe or something like that, it is expensive. You can get, um, I would say probably to buy unhealthy food at a cafe is also really
Yeah, it
expensive.
can be. Yep,
But
yep,
yeah,
yep.
there's strategies and things to use, in terms of driving the cost of food down, even in the state that we're in the moment. So food wastage is a huge problem. We we waste so much food.
Yeah.
So think about how you can reduce your own waste. So, for example, um, don't wait till your fruit and veggies like get moldy in the fridge, and soggy and things like that. You can just freeze them straight away. I've got huge bags of bananas, for example, that would otherwise just be thrown out or given to puppies, uh, who love banana and peanut butter, by the way.
Can imagine.
So, you just before they turn, cut them up, put them in the freezer, and then you're using them, to make the most delicious creamy chocolate smoothie. So things like that, buying on special, Coles and Woolies, what they do well is they do a lot of stuff that's half price a lot of the time. And what I learned, from someone that talks a lot on social media about reducing this years ago, you can watch a lot of great content about how to reduce the cost. But she was talking about what was the trick I learned from her? Oh, well, she taught me about the bags of things in the freezer to start with. I've lost my train of thought,
That's
but
okay.
I'll come back to it.
We'll come back to it.
But there's heaps of ways that you can drive the cost of your food down. Cook once, eat multiple times. So, I'm a huge fan of saving time and money in the kitchen. So if you're making a bolognese, whether you make it for one serve or you make it for four serves, it's really no difference. So if you're buying in bulk and you do it that way, and then everything's ready to go and then it's convenient, and that's the way to feed your kids healthy as well. They're like hungry. Okay, I've got some bolognese. Like I don't have a kid that's said no to a spaghetti bolognese before, and
Mm,
that's real food.
mm. Seems like with many things that we talk about on this podcast, that really what we're trying to do here is to build awareness so that people can create their own sort of subsystem within a system that isn't really serving them 100%. And when you look at, the big franchises, bringing in low cost food, but really sending us down that blood sugar sort of roller coaster, when it's so available, so easy, so convenient, so addictive, it's challenging,
Yeah.
right? And then you couple that with the fact that I would reckon that the education level around eating habits is not hugely strong, and I think there would be a lot of misnomers out there, and fallacies. One of the ones, the 100% sort of fat-free kind of
Yeah.
aspect of things that came around. I don't know, I think it was around the 80s or the 90s, because I still hear people of that vintage talking about that. And but the question that I have is, what are the systemic changes that need to be made? Is it education, access, awareness? More regulation around those big food outlets. What do we need to do so that we can actually move towards a better nutrition for all?
Oh, great question. And lots of smart people working on this, and lots of things happening globally that that are being introduced. So, Mexico introduced a tax on because they had a problem with overconsumption of sugar sweetened beverages, cokes and things like that. So kids just drinking soft drinks. So, policy change is really important at a system level. There's lots of research going into advertising and what children are exposed to, and the way that advertising can be very subliminal. What's on the box as well. Say the box of cereal. So at a policy level, there's some great things happening. We need to do more, because we haven't been able to shift at a population level. Dialing in nutrition and increasing the consumption of, say, fruits and vegetables. That we haven't been able to shift that. But when there are things like systemic changes, like removing vending machines that sell soft drink in hospitals,
Yeah.
like there's things like that that are going on that are just crazy. The rewards that companies are getting, the tax breaks that companies are getting. So I think at a policy level, a lot needs to happen to change, at a system level so that the healthy whole foods are more accessible to people,
Yeah.
and that there's some distance put in between us and processed foods. Like it's more difficult to access. It's more expensive. Like for me, I think that's really important. Like rewarding the farmers, and not rewarding like the big processed food giants. I mean, we need to do more around that.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. Again, it's about, to begin with, unfortunately, awareness can be slow, but it really needs to be awareness first, and then from there a real push, right? And these initiatives that you've suggested make a lot of sense to me. I also think that people are so busy these days, and there also almost has been a cultural shift from knowing how to cook to not really knowing how to cook anymore. Any insights into that?
Yeah, talking about that a couple of weeks ago, weren't we? I found it fascinating to think about there's a whole generation now, our generation, that have missed out on learning how to cook
Mm,
because both parents had to go to work for the first time. Previously, most likely a lot of the time only one parent had to work. And so one parent was at home, and that parent was cooking the meals, and the children were able to learn to cook. And now we've got a whole generation, our generation now, that haven't had that experience. And so one of the biggest things that we can do is, get your children involved in the kitchen. And confidence is always a barrier. If you're low in confidence in the kitchen, it's really difficult to feel comfortable to make your own food. So, learning how to put things together in a way that food is delicious, because real food is delicious. But there are some things that you can do to help educate yourself and then your families.
so get in the kitchen, start getting back in there and playing around with great fresh produce, and watching your favorite YouTube people cooking stuff, and get yourself confident again, so that you have a built practice and something you can sort of implement that actually helps you with your nutrition plan.
Oh, absolutely, Joe. Like I bought all the cookbooks,
Yeah.
and what I learned when I was trying to dial in my nutrition was these recipes were amazing chefs, but they were chefs. I wasn't a chef. I'm not a chef. I'm a very good cook, but I'm very basic. And so these, what I did that has helped people in our programs is I put together meals that are one bowl. They're one fry pan or one slow cooker or one Vitamix or one Thermomix, and everything goes in there, and out comes something that's super tasty because it's made of real food, and that hasn't taken a lot of time. And by nature of it being simple ingredients, it also ends up saving you money,
Yep.
because if you're using 4 ingredients compared to 14 ingredients,
Yep.
then you're gonna save a whole lot of money, and you're gonna reduce your waste. So I found that that really hurt my confidence when I was trying to always having to follow a recipe and 5 pans and 15 ingredients and 3 hours.
Yeah, start slow.
That's not
Yeah.
feasible. It's not feasible
Yeah.
for the busy modern family.
Yeah.
You need, and kids love being in the kitchen. Like it's really fun throwing things in. Like, I one of my favorite, one a crowd favorite in our program is the pancakes. And they're whole food. They're absolutely delicious, cheeky monkey pancakes. And, my son, both my kids can make pancakes. They can make scrambled eggs, and, teaching them how to do something. It's so satisfying for them to make a meal and then to eat that meal. And, that sort of behavior change is really important in children.
No, that's great advice. I was also thinking, just from an advice perspective, I want people to come away not just with the awareness, but also the solutions, because we talked a lot about gut health and its connection to the mind. And I think about, again, this episode is really about sort of discussing about making better decisions in life can come from actually improving your nutrition, your gut health, your brain health, so on. So, what can we do to relieve the gut from? What are the three things that we can do immediately? Maybe not immediately, maybe after Christmas, but what are the three things that we can do to really like improve our gut health?
Yeah, love it. Love the question. So, 3 things. Another, acronym, JERF, just eat real food. And actually,
Brilliant.
Christmas, Thanksgiving, and all of those, peak holiday times, you'll notice that if you look at spreads of what people are serving at Christmas, it actually is real food. You've got your ham, you've got your turkey, you've got your salads, you've got your veggies, and you're crowding the table with that. It doesn't matter that you've got a bowl of, I don't know, chocolate almonds or, some bread rolls and things like that. The body is way smarter than that. So, that there's a reason that that food is so tasty. All of the colors and textures on a plate, mixed together. Eating in a place where you're really enjoying each other's company, to improve digestion, to improve gut health. So that's my first one. My second point that you can do, immediately is to move after your meals. To talking about the blood sugar roller coaster and how to improve insulin sensitivity and your blood sugar control. Muscles are sponges. Picking up the worst thing you can do is to eat a meal and then land on the couch and watch some Netflix and then roll into
Guilty.
bed.
Guilty.
Well, once you know, you can't unknow, Joe. So, moving for 5 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes. So anyone with a pet like me, go just they have to, usually they have to go to the bathroom before bed. So you're picking them up, you're walking them around the block. There's your move after meals done. Maybe you want to put on a load of washing or do the washing up. Gentle movement, whether it's walking or just cleaning, but really relying on that movement to pick up the glucose in your bloodstream, shuttle it into the muscles. That will really improve, especially at night, where we really do lose, the benefit of gravity because our digestion, it takes a couple of hours to digest your food, and being upright is really supportive of improving digestion. We do not want you digesting while you're sleeping. What that does is, affect your energy, your focus, because your body hasn't spent time detoxing, which is what your brain does at night. The gut is too busy digesting. So we really separate those behaviors. And the third would be, I would say, eat more plants. The plants, what they have in them is the polyphenols, the color, the pigment that feeds the 38 trillion microbes that we have in our body that is their food. So if you thought about the gut like a rainforest, so healthy. Close your eyes, Joe, and think about a rainforest. You've got lush greenery, you've got flora and fauna, you've got animals, big and small, and there's a hierarchy. It's exactly the same in the body. We have an animal kingdom in a forest. So, you don't want a barren dirt and cobwebs. You want a really thriving rainforest in there. So the plant foods, the real food, really go in there and help. Yeah, I really believe the gut is a great place to start. When you see a healthy gut, I'll add a bonus for you. You see healthy poops. Are you okay talking about poo for a minute?
Yeah, we're fine. We're fine. We don't have to beep anything out.
So your poo really is talking to you. If you are sitting here and you don't, first of all, if you don't know what your poo looks like, that is the first thing that you can change and give yourself a big tick for knowing what your poop is. But if we want you to be pooing 1 to 3 times a day. We want them to look like a sausage or a snake. No marks on the bottom of the bowl, no smell, right? That is a really good indication of a healthy gut, a healthy brain, healthy metabolic and hormone health. If
Hmm.
that's not happening, that's okay. Awareness is the first step to change. So data is everything. That poo is giving you great data about your body and then what we can do to rectify that. So if you've got floaties, if you've got pellets, if you've got embarrassing gas like I had,
Mhm.
um, you know, um, if you've got any kind of discomfort or fluid retention or feeling puffy, that is your first step to know that we have to do some things to make your gut and body healthy.
Oh, this is amazing. I got 4 and I got the poo conversation at the end, which was an added bonus. I love that. I love it. You know, I also just didn't want to miss out on the fact that look, even I do a little bit of reading in this space, and there's so many diets out there, and it gets confusing. The paleo, there's obviously the fasting stuff. There's obviously carnivore diet. There's the vegan, just straight vegan diet. Pescatarian, Mediterranean, all that. Um, where do you which one do you choose, your principles are great, because I think the principles that you outlined to me gives me an impression that many of them could work. It's just, but yeah, could you maybe talk to us about that because it is confusing.
Oh my gosh, it is such a confusing world, and you are so right. I'm a firm believer in that there's no right or wrong, and it's not black or white. The reason that I say jerk, just eat real food, is because you can be a pescatarian, a vegan, a vegetarian, a carnivore. Carnivore, yeah. There's question marks around
Controversy.
how to use a carnivore diet. Yeah, definitely can be used to heal chronic disease, but I don't believe it's a long term diet to support humans.
Yep.
But the point is, all of you can. I want people to enjoy food and to do things. There's also cultural beliefs and religions and things like that. So you need to eat to feel good. And I believe that you choose the diet that works for you. And that might change as well. I work with athletes, like where we really drive up, we drive up different parts of their diet. Whereas if I'm working with a perimenopausal, menopausal woman or a man in andropause, there's different things that we're doing there to use different diets to their advantage. But the main thing is you eat how you want to eat. I
Mm,
mean, real food, there's no judgment around that.
mhm.
Eat eggs, you don't eat eggs, you eat fish, you don't eat fish. We want you to eat real food, and that should just fit into your ethos and your beliefs.
Is there any logic or science around? Just because I was thinking about, you were talking about race and religion. Is there
Mm.
any sort of logic around eating the way my ancestors would have when they were hovering around the pyramids? You know,
Oh my gosh, absolutely.
okay.
Yeah,
Could you talk to me about
I
that?
do believe.
Yeah.
Well, so there's all this, fancy testing that you can do, but I think when you heal your when you heal your gut, you become very much more in tune, to what foods work for you and what foods, aren't as great for you. But, my mum, was born in Malta. And so, I believe that I watch what she does well on, or what my Irish clients do well on, or what my, European, so she's a European, what the European clients do well on. Um, Compared to my father who is Australian. So, I do think that there's with, English ties, I do think there's a difference in your how well you do. I see that a lot with rice. Cultures that have been brought up with a lot of rice or a lot of legumes, they generally do well off those foods. And then there's cultures that, that's not really kind of a big part of the diet that don't do so well off those foods. So I would say the biggest difference I've seen is in foods like legumes and rice, where they're very much a part of the culture in, say, India and Africa and things like that.
How cool. I mean, guys, think about this, right? Like, you have the ability to honor the past,
Mm.
make good choices with your food, and think about where you came from. I think that's that's super cool to think about. What 3 or 4 generations ago, how they may have been eating, um, just by circumstance of their environment, and then perhaps trying to replicate that and ritualize it, honor it. Something nice about that. It might just be me.
Absolutely. It's beautiful.
Yeah,
It's beautiful.
yeah. So I'm mindful of time, and whilst we wind down, I really think that the last question that I'd like to ask you is a question that I ask all my guests. And touch wood, you continue to live the fruitful life that you are, and you continue to be the mouthpiece for great life and nutrition. But if you only had one good year left of health, how would you use that good year?
Um, oh my goodness, travel the world. I always say we talked earlier about eating this way is expensive. And I would say, giving yourself back the gift of health is the most expensive thing that you can do for yourself because you are able to travel the world. When I'm 85, I want to be I want to be on a plane. I want to be playing tennis. I want to be hiking.
Yeah.
I don't want to be in a home assisted living, having someone support me while I get off the bathroom. So, yeah, I'm very much into preventative. Prevention is so important in terms of lifestyle medicine now to prevent chronic disease. So, yeah, Joe, I'd be traveling the world and hopefully, speaking to as many people as I possibly can about, um, you know, helping them understand that feeling phenomenal is our birthright. We deserve to feel amazing, and we deserve to be the person that we were designed to be. And that's our responsibility. So, yeah.
Great answer. And I think why I love this episode is because you're really the embodiment of the advice that you're giving. And you've been able to transform yourself. And the story at the start of the of our recording is quite empowering, and it's quite possible for anyone to make the change. I think there's both a good balance of talking about the issues that we're confronting, which are very real, but there's a really good amount of solutions that people can actually jump on, perhaps again in the new year, as a resolution that might stay. But I want to thank you very much for being on the podcast and on this particular episode and the season, which is themed health. It's been super insightful. I've got a few things I need to implement at home.
Thank you, Joe, for all that you do. It's been a blast being here today, and I really appreciate you inviting me so I can share the mission and the desire for every person to feel phenomenal, and that starts with healthy cells.
Awesome.
Thank
You're
you.
super welcome.
If you have resonated in any way with the sentiments of this podcast, we would be delighted to direct you to our website, www.itsneveraboutmoney.com.au, for more free resources and education aimed at improving your capacity to make sound financial decisions for the benefit of your family. We wish you every success, however you define it.